All right, good afternoon, everyone. And if I could, my name is Gilbert Smith, and this is the Bradenton Kiwanis Club. Thank you for being here. A special welcome to our guests. It's great to have you here. And now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And could I ask Mr. Minor to come forward to give us our invocation?
Thank you, Gilbert. We pray with you, please? Dear Lord Jesus, I just wanted to come to you before you today. Bless this club, bless all the members here, Lord. Let's always remember our mission is for the children of Manatee County and do that to the best of our abilities. In your precious name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Andy. And we have many guests with us today, and we want to welcome all of you here. If any of you guests that are here are interested in joining Bradenton Kiwanis Club, please see an officer about the membership committee chairs. Sharon Barhurst is here, or Jack Powers. You can see Jack also. We'd love to talk to you about joining Bradenton Kiwanis, and we've got a great group here. We do a lot of fun things, and we'd love to have you join our family. So welcome to all of you that are here in person today. Please note that the theater has a mandate that masks are required to be worn while in the building. Please make sure to place your mask back on once you are done eating your meal. And thank you for making it easier for all of us to keep an in-person meetings going forward. Now, our meetings are now being held on Zoom and in person. If you are wanting to attend a meeting at the hall in person, you need to purchase a ticket through the box office for $13.50. This will pay for your boxed lunch. The hard cutoff to purchase a ticket to attend on a previous Friday at 5 p.m. The door downstairs will be locked right at 12:10 p.m. in order to start the meeting. Please attend on time. We are also requiring each attendee to sign a liability waiver in order to attend. Please make sure yours is on file with us. Now, the Bradenton Kiwanis Club will be having a board meeting next week, Wednesday, February 17th. And at this time, I also want to have an announcement. I think Don Stanhope's going to give us an announcement for youth services on Zoom.
On behalf of the Youth Services Committee, I'd like to let you all know that with our partnership with Manatee Elementary School, we are starting the Bug Bringing Up Grades program with the fourth quarter, which starts out on March 22nd, and we are looking for Kiwanis volunteers who will adopt the individual classrooms that will be benefiting from this program. We have a total of 11 slots that we're looking to fill. We will be asking folks to fill out a request for volunteerism ahead of time. We need to do additional screening in order to fit the requirements for the school to have you come on site. And I'm really excited because our committee is working on a video to roll out the program, so when the volunteers go into the classrooms, you're really just bringing them the materials, and you'll have a video to share what they need to do in terms of setting up goals. And then from there, you'll just be checking in with your teacher to see how things are going. And then at the end of the fourth quarter, there will be a celebration. And so we've got some really exciting things to put together for that celebration. I want to thank Sharon for co-leading this group, and she's been really active in the business community to get lots of great things both for the kids when they reach their goals as well as for the teachers that are supporting this initiative. And this is at one school of 3 that our Bradenton Kiwanis is sponsoring. We're also sponsoring Bringing Up Grades program at Palmetto Elementary, and we have a teacher over at Rogers through the Satellite Club that is promoting it there. All in total, we will be serving 528 kids with this program at 3 Title I schools. So this is really exciting. It is a great way to get connected in the community and help our kids out. If you have an interest, please see Sharon after the meeting. We'll also put the information in links in the next newsletter. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Don. And if I could ask Neil to come on up and give us our announcements for community service projects.
Thank you, Judge. Again, we have multiple opportunities to service in the community. We'll start with Saturday, February 20th, Kids Against Hunger with Manatee Sunrise. We'll have 2 different sessions from 10 to 12 and 1 to 3. Up to 10 people for each shift can sign up, and we've already gotten about halfway through those already. 5 or 6 people have signed up for each shift, so thank you all for doing that. And then finally, we'll be doing our another Meals on Wheels food distribution event. That will be packaging of the items at the food bank on February 22nd, which is a Monday, from 8:30 to 11. We've had 3 people sign up. We have 3 more spots available. On February 23rd, we'll do some more packaging at the food bank, 8:30 to 11 in the morning again. We have 2 signed up, 2 left to go, so please feel free to sign up. And then all of the distribution of those packaged items will be at the Renaissance on 9th on Wednesday, February 24 from they're asking us to do it from 2:30 to 6, and we have the ability to get up to 12 people at that, and we have plenty of spots available for that if you want to. I think that's all the community service we have, so thank you.
So thank you, Neil. And when we left off last week talking about the history, we now are in 1950, and for those of you that have been in Manatee County for a long time, Bradenton has changed a lot, and for a period of time, it did not seem to not change for some of us who stayed a small river town on the coast with a number of things that made it feel so warm and friendly. One of the things that has changed through the years has been, as I've talked to you about, is the shoreline in Bradenton. That is a aerial of Bradenton looking south. And for those on Zoom, I hope that you're seeing this picture of the pier, and to the left of it, you can see the Green Bridge. Now, I hope that you notice that the Green Bridge is connecting to Bradenton on a street that's different than 9th. And a lot of you in the room, and probably a lot of you on Zoom, remember when it connected to 10th Street. 10th Street was the bridge we always took to Bradenton, and you can see how 9th Street is long and goes south. So that was something happened later, and we're going to be talking to that in future meetings. Members of this club were being deployed at this time in 1950 to the Korean War. We're going to talk more about that in the future, but our speaker today, who has got his own experiences about things that happened in Southeast Asia, will be able to share some things about his experiences, but he was too young to do it this one. Now this is a photo of Manatee High School in 1950. And the club has historically had a connection to this high school since it was the only high school that was in Manatee County when the club started. And so something happened significant in 1950. Manatee High School acquired a new coach, Wheeler Lee, who would become a member of this club and eventually the president. We're going to talk more about that. But he had many, many victories while he was at Manatee High School. This is a photo of Dr. Willett Wenzel. And on January 3rd, 1950, the club held its ladies' night and installation dinner, and Dr. Wenzel was sworn in as the 1950 president. And he was, at that time, one of the most prominent physicians in Manatee County who was a true believer in community service. He was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and he graduated with his undergraduate and his medical degree from Northwestern University. He moved to Manatee County in 1937 and established an office in downtown Bradenton with, at that time, Dr. Hubbard Gates in the professional building. But after the United States declared war against Germany and Japan, like so many other Americans, Dr. Wenzel felt compelled to join the war effort. He closed his medical practice and enlisted in the United States Army Air Force. As a doctor, he earned the rank of captain and became a flight surgeon, serving on the 39th Bomb Squadron in England, France, Belgium, and Holland. He flew on bombing missions throughout the time, and including bombing missions on D-Day. He was honorably discharged in 1945 and returned to Bradenton to reopen his practice. And at that time, there were only 8 doctors in Manatee County, and he became one of the most prosperous, but also one of the most regarded doctors. And he was elected as president of the Manatee County Medical Society for 4 terms. He was a devoted family man, but he also believed in community service, and he volunteered for so many organizations, including the Manatee Players, the South Florida Museum, the Bishop SPCA, and the Boy Scouts. And he did so much. He was like so many other members of this club, named as a Distinguished Citizen of the Year in 1975. The next slide is a photo of the dedication of the DeSoto Memorial Monument. And remember, I've talked about this with you before with Dr. Sugg, how he is so involved in this. March 24th, 1950, when several hundred people showed up at the dedication at the DeSoto National Monument. And the club was well represented, not only by people that were there as spectators, but also by those speaking, including Mayor Sterling Hall, Dr. Sugg, of course, and former Mayor Gabby Knowles, who is a past president of this club. Now, this is a photo of Gabby Knowles, which really leads into the next thing I want to talk to you about the club. And remember that I talked to you about before, and we're going to have in future meetings someone in Gabby Knowles' family come speak to us. But Gabby had broad influence throughout the nation and in Washington, D.C. And so as an example of that influence, on June 27, 1950, at a regular meeting, Paul Davis, who we're going to hear about a lot next week, moderated a panel on conflicts that were going on in Korea. And he announced that President Truman had ordered warships and planes to aid the democratic nation of the South Korea Republic to repulse an invasion of the communist North Korea. Now, after hearing this panel, this club did this. This club unanimously passed a resolution supporting President Truman's actions and sent it to him. Now, can you see what the influence this club did have, because they had connections to Washington, as I talked to you before about Gabby's connections to Washington, D.C., and with last week we talked about U.S. Spessard Holland. Now, this photo is a photo of an article from the St. Petersburg Times. And I just want to tell you, the St. Petersburg Times goes back into the 1800s of being published. And this is an article about the club and the Bradenton Trailer Park, which had reached the capacity of 1,190 lots. And so the club's notoriety was getting known throughout the nation and throughout the state. And so this article was published. Now let me tell you another fact that's very interesting about the influence that the club had. The residents of the park in 1950 made an economic impact on the community, since the population of the park was 10% of the population of the city of Bradenton. That's how many voters were there. So it's obvious, isn't it, from studying the history of the club, why it had influence in the community and also people who wanted to be members of this club. Next slide is the Girl Scout Little House, and this is actually a fairly recent picture, but as always, I'm looking for pictures that happened close to the time. It would be 1950, but this is a recent one. And on October 29, 1950, this building was dedicated, and Kiwanian and our mayor, Sterling Hall, recognized this club, for providing $7,000 as the major funding of the construction of this building. That the city of Bradenton actually had given them the lot, but this club made the major donation to do this. And it was one of the biggest projects the club did this year. Now, to summarize for today, on December 19, 1950, Paul Davis was elected as 1951 president, along with English DeChamps as vice president and Judge George Hitchcock as vice president. And by the end of the year, in 1950, the club had had a good year recruiting members, and they had 13 members, and that's something Sharon will continue to work towards. Now, our speaker today is Jim Jones, and he's been a friend to this club ever since he arrived in Bradenton in 1999. And he's not only a friend of this club, but I'll tell you that he's a friend to all these organizations that we support. He tells their story, he tells our story, and he partners with us in supporting those organizations. He continues to build on a distinguished career in journalism as he shares the story of his life, a distinguished career in the military, which a lot of people didn't know. And so I'm sharing a few photos, and Jim's going to have a lot more photos for you. But this photo is, here's a photo of Jim in 1985. It has his computer. He'll tell you more about that. And that is interesting computer. And then the last photo, do I need to explain any more? This is the book that Jim's written is got some local flavor to it, as you can see from the next slide, from this slide. And I do want us all to join in welcoming Jim to the Bradenton Kiwanis Club. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Kiwanis. Good afternoon. Thank you for all the service you do to Bradenton. Very interesting history of the club there. How do we go about changing the slides, Janine?
Tell
her.
Okay. Okay.
You get to tell me what to do now.
Okay. As Judge Smith mentioned, I've written a book. It's got a short title, Oh Darling, and it's got a long subtitle. Choices and Struggle in the Age of Sputnik, the Vietnam War, and the New Millennium. And it's possible, you can go to the second slide, that a better book could have been written about other members of my family. This is my sister Caroline that's coming up here.
Hold on.
Okay.
Two screens. Hey.
Go ahead and just tell you a little bit about it while the photo was coming up. I have 5 sisters, and Carolyn's the youngest. Early in her working career after high school, we thought she was going to be an EMT because she actually went to an autopsy when she was in high school and didn't faint. It didn't bother her. She was okay with it. But later on, that's Carolyn, she harvested oysters and clams for a living for several years. And then she drove a cab, and she wrangled rattlesnakes. And then she was manager of a company that made lawn furniture. And now she's a manager of a big box store in Fernandina Beach. She's got an easy button. She's off to the phone. I didn't know a lot of the background until recently because I got drafted into the Army while she was very young and left St. Augustine and never lived there again. I came back to visit but never lived there. So Darling, I think, is a pretty good love story at heart, but it's not all about that. And my wife's picture's on there because this place is not going to sell any books. the book has details about my life as a soldier before going into the Army, and then also the experiences that derive from the folks that I met working at a newspaper since 1977. So in essence, my parents met during World War II. My dad was drafted into the Army before Pearl Harbor, and he was assigned one time at St. Augustine. He had a tent city there, and he met my mother, who was working in Alexander's restaurant downtown. And then he went away to Europe, was with Patton's Third Army, and got his feet frozen at the Battle of the Bulge. Came back after the war, they got married, went to Virginia. I was born in Virginia, and after 5 years, because he had medical problems, they came to St. Augustine, which was my mom's hometown. And talking to Judge Smith, and he and I had somewhat of a similar background of not being the most distinguished students in high school. I certainly wasn't. I ran track for 3 years. I was a half miler. I was a pretty good half miler. And I liked art and history, but the rest of it not so much, not even English. And early on I developed a love of fishing and oystering, and I liked the Beatles when they came out. Still like the Beatles, but I don't fish and oyster anymore. I got to shake Vice President Lyndon Johnson's hand when he came to St. Augustine, 1963. He was there for the kickoff of the 400th anniversary of St. Augustine. They were getting ready to celebrate the 400th anniversary in 1965. And I was just standing there. He had finished his speech, and I thought I wouldn't get close to him. Suddenly I'm looking up, there's Lyndon Johnson with his hand out like that. And how you doing, son? That was about it. And then a couple of years later, my sisters and I got to meet the Dave Clark Five. You kind of
Okay.
move this ahead.
You just got to tell me when.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's me, my fishing. Okay, this is Dave Clark Five. That's my sister Sandy with the blonde hair there, and that's Dave Smith, the lead singer of the Dave Clark, which was a big deal back in the day. They were kind of rivals of the Beatles, and took that little point-and-shoot camera. Actually, pretty good glass in that little camera, and so my sisters were more excited about that than me getting to see LBJ. So that was a bigger deal for them. My dad was I just did something my daughter said not to do, don't say but I can't help it. My dad was a 6th grade dropout, which was not all that unusual back in that day. The Great Depression, a lot of kids dropped out of school. And my dad was very bright, great mechanical aptitude. He's a mechanic. He became the city manager of the city garage and became the manager of the city garage in St. Augustine. And but his lack of education hurt him some, to misparaphrase a Paul Simon song. So he's always preached to me to finish high school, which I did, although it was hit and miss a little bit. But first job after high school was working for a federal survey crew, surveying farm fields in Elkton, Spuds, Hastings, outside of St. Augustine. And I never did that. I didn't look through the transit. I was a stick guy. Jump off and on of a pickup truck and hold a stick until they recorded the settings. That was a 3-month job. And after that, I worked briefly at a grocery store. And then my neighbor, who was a printer, told me about a job the Florida Times Union had. I thought I wanted to be an artist at one time, so I went up, applied. That job was already taken, but they said, we got a job as an apprentice pressman, you want that? And I said, yeah. So that was my introduction to newspapers. That was into 1965. And after a couple of months, I got drafted into the Army, so that was like my last connection with newspapers until about 1977. But, going into the Army, I wondered about being able to measure up to others. This is my dad in World War II with a cigar. Whether I could measure up to what they had done. And I had relatives in the Civil War, I think probably the Revolution as well. My dad and 2 uncles were World War II. One uncle was killed in Italy, south of Arno River. Was cemetery there. Had another uncle that was in the Korean War, got the combat infantry badge. And then my grandfather, Johnson, was World War I, but he never got out of Camp Jackson, South Carolina, because he had the Spanish flu. And we think it probably shortened his life. He lived only until about 48 years old and died during World War II. Been air raid warden in St. Augustine during World War II. Anyway, my dad drove me to the Jacksonville he drove me to the Greyhound bus station in St. Augustine. They took us to Jacksonville to the induction station. Then we went to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I had my basic combat training. And I did pretty well, actually. I was a high score on the physical combat proficiency test. And then I went to light weapons infantry at Fort Ord. I'm back in the third row, about the fourth one from the right. And there I got a maximum score on the proficiency test for light weapons infantry. And then from there I took a sharp turn at Officer Candidate School. You can move it forward. At Fort Gordon, Georgia. And so I graduated from there in April 1967 and went to Germany. You had a dream sheet you could do, and I put on there that I wanted to go to Germany. I didn't really want to go to Vietnam. But after I got to Germany, after about 7 months, I volunteered for Vietnam because the duty was so terrible. In Germany, we were in the field all the time with the helmets on, and it gets pretty cold in the woods in Germany in the wintertime. And so, you go to the next slide. So this is Vietnam and Water Buffalo. This is outside of Soc Trang. I didn't go there immediately, but it was an airfield. It was surrounded by rice fields on 3 sides. But started out as an assistant operations officer in the Signal Battalion in Canton, which is the largest city in the Delta. And it was good for me. I learned a lot from the major who was the operations officer. And after 5 months, they sent me down to Soc Trang as a company commander. And you can move it ahead to the next. Okay. And this is my first sergeant and myself, Roy Yanamura, great first sergeant, and a really good one to have for Green Company commander, the first lieutenant at that time. And so I spent a lot of my time visiting our sites. We had 6 signal sites across the Delta, 120 men, and I was basically on a helicopter or a jeep going to see how they were doing and if they had what they needed to get their job done. And you can go to the next one. And you can go to the next one. This is just that was Quan Creek. This is I'm pinning a Purple Heart on one guy here. And we had a mortar attack. 2 people were wounded, but fortunately nobody, in the 7 months I was company commander, was killed. So that was like one of my great fears going to Vietnam, that we would lose somebody. We didn't. So the other fellow got a Bronze Star. Roger Rowe, I was in contact with him for a long time. He died a few years ago of cancer. And the fellow in the back was the fellow who replaced me, Captain Anderson, as a company commander. Anyway, you can go forward. That's Quang Tri right there, up near the DMZ. Okay, so late in my tour. Okay, sorry.
Thanks.
Met Kim, and it changed my life right there. And so I proposed just with weeks left, and at that time I couldn't stay to get married because they said you got your orders, so you're going to go to Fort Knox. You're going to be an instructor in the communications school. So okay, so I told her to wait for me and went back to St. Augustine. Then I flew up to Washington D.C., got my assignment changed, and went right back to Vietnam. And then after a year of being counseled and submitting to investigations and studies, we were approved to be married. But then, nothing is ever easy. Like the gentleman who was trying to put up a plaque will tell you earlier today, nothing is easy. On our wedding day, I was at the chapel with a bunch of guys in jungle fatigues, and she didn't show up. So all kind of thoughts went through my mind about what had happened. None of them were good. What I found out later, she had no way to communicate with me, was that a friend was bringing her, a civilian friend who worked for IBM, was bringing her to the chapel at Long Bend in a company car that had been in an accident. Saigon police were looking for it. They stopped the car, and they hauled everybody down to the police station. Long enough to ruin the cake, the flowers, and the wedding. So that night I found out what happened. 3 days later, I checked the Jeep out, drove to Saigon, picked her up, and then we had a wedding that in front of a bunch of guys in jungle fatigues, but no cake. That was in December, and then in June of '70, we came back, we left Vietnam together, came to Fort Gordon, Georgia, that's at Fort Gordon, and I became a company commander again for a training company. Didn't want to be a company commander because I had a new wife, but anyway, that's kind of like, you're at what the government needs. And so was a company commander, then I was a battalion executive officer, went to the career course, and then from there we went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, where our daughter was born. Good timing. By the way, we did have wedding cake 25 years later on our 25th anniversary. And like the wedding had been full of surprises, the anniversary was full of surprises. Kim didn't know about it. We surprised her with it. And then, by the way, today, February the 9th, is the 55th anniversary of the day I went in the Army. So that's pretty big.
We need tape.
December, we had a 50th wedding anniversary. So it's worked out pretty well. The genesis for this book started about 2006. I went back to Vietnam with Kim for the first time since we left Vietnam together in 1971. This is in front of a temple in her hometown that her family helped to build, a Buddhist temple. And then there's another temple that her family had helped build going way back 1867. It's kind of like downtown Bac Lu. Bac Lu is way down south. Very south in Vietnam. The U Minh Forest, which was like a big Viet Cong area, was just south of there. And mostly the Army, the Republic of Vietnam, and the American Army did not go through that area. It was that bad. So anyway, it was just a vibrant and happy experience going back to Vietnam, which really surprised me. Her family was amazing. And so I began, even though I was there on my own dime, I began to tell me how we're doing when time would get. Even though I wasn't there as a reporter, and I was, we paid for the trip and everything, I began sending some stories back to Joan Crowder, who was our executive editor at the Bradenton Herald at the time, over the internet. My mother-in-law had internet in her house, but it was dial-up and very slow. And it went out over WD1, which was the two-pair wire that the Army had used in Vietnam for communications, like for connecting field phones and little field switchboards. And so it turned into an 8-part series. And the question that I was getting from folks was something that was not in the series: how did I meet Kim? That kind of became the idea that maybe this could be a bigger story. So let's say that the book is kind of a glance back at the past, sometimes in sorrow and sometimes in joy. My dad drove me to the Greyhound bus station in 1956, put me on the bus to go in the Army, and then he got to see me about 20 years later when I got promoted to Lieutenant Colonel in the Army Reserve. And then he died from ALS shortly after that. So the best part of writing this book has been a response from readers and emails, phone calls. And a lot of times it triggers their own memories of that time of coming of age in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and experiences that they had. I had one classmate from St. Augustine High School who reached out to me because my mom had worked at the Blue Bay Cafe, great name for a cafe in St. Augustine. Turned out his mom worked around the corner at the Del Monaco restaurant in St. Augustine, and the third classmate, I'm not sure what restaurant it was, but it was another one downtown St. Augustine. And then he told me about his experiences in the National Guard. He was able to get in. Actually, I tried to get into the National Guard or Reserve before I was drafted, and it was full I couldn't, so that's how I ended up being drafted. And the book also has some encounters with, I think Judge Smith mentioned this, with some notables like LBJ, you kind of heard that one, John Glenn, Stephen Stills, Yoko Ono, and a great photographer, Jack Mitchell. Jack Mitchell, you may not have heard of, but he actually took he had the last studio session with John and Yoko before John was killed in 1980. So it was really interesting to hear his stories about, got to be good friends with him and hear his stories. Just a little bit about the newspaper career, and then if anyone has questions, we'd be glad to hear them. Started my newspaper career in 1977 after graduating from University of South Florida. And it was tough getting into the business at the time because there was so many baby boomers that wanted to be the next Woodward and Bernstein out of Watergate. And so I started my career at Clewiston News down in Lake Okeechobee. And was there for 8.5 years. My journalism professor, George Meyer, was amazed that I stayed in Clewiston so long, but I would tell him that the grain in the glade is as good as the grain anywhere. Besides that, I didn't have any desire to go to, really out of step with most of the journalism world, but I didn't have any desire to go to New York Times or Washington Post. I wanted to stay in Florida. I'd moved my family around enough, I thought, during the Army. And so after 8.5 years, I went to New Smyrna Beach, Observer newspaper. It was a 3-day-a-week paper, and they were getting ready to go to a daily, so I was hired to take them daily. And I ended up being there for 14 years. And then I came to Bradenton in 1999, October 1999, and retired in 2013 and came back to work 6 months later. I've seen some drastic changes in technology, drastic changes in the business. Downsizing, when I came here, we had 63 folks in the newsroom. Now we've got, like a dozen. And the technology is totally different. I've been through so many revolutions of technology in the business, from hot type to cold type, and the computer you showed was made in Australia, and it was a very difficult, tricky system that we had. And then before that, we had like a minibus terminal, which was, it had an attached keyboard, which was like deadly to your wrist. So at this point in my life, it's all gravy. It's like I am a dinosaur that's walking around and still enjoying the business. So at this point, if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to hear. Yes, sir.
Tim, could you tell us about your that call you had with Jeb Bush?
Yeah. My daughter was interested in politics as a kid, and had a Republican straw poll in Orlando. I guess this was in 1990s, mid-1990s. They had everybody there they had McCain, they had Pat Buchanan, Lamar Alexander. Anyway, so we got, and I took her just kind of as an educational thing, and they had these overzealous volunteers that were there, and they were like, they're all Nazis. They were saying, sit down, don't do this, don't do that. And so I did what they said, but I don't think I was being out of line at all. So anyway, I complained to one of the Republicans who was there that I knew from New Smyrna Beach. Didn't think anything else about it. Then a couple of weeks later, I was filling out a paper late at night, and I get this call from Jeb Bush, and he apologized. I was so impressed by that I just was a small little daily, and I wasn't in a position to really help him or hurt him, and I thought that was, just made a real impression. I never forgot that. And of course, Jeb, when he decided to run for president a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, got demolished by Trump like all the other candidates did. That was a very good field. Anyway, okay, so any other questions?
Jim, what is the most significant piece that you remember writing for either our newspaper, the Bradenton Herald, or something, you know, from the other newspapers you work for?
I think that the thing I got the most reaction from was the series I did on Vietnam, because I heard so much from readers. I heard and this was in 2006, and internet was pretty strong already. I heard from people not only here in Bradenton, but from around the country. I heard from, it put me back in contact with, the night we had that mortar attack that 2 people were wounded in Sacrang, Sergeant of the Guard called me, and he said that's the way he remembered it too, that what I had in the story. So it's like, you know, you got to be careful what you put out there, because you're being fact checked by the world these days. And he actually was getting ready to go back out and check on the people at that bunker, and if he'd gotten there earlier, he might have been killed or wounded himself. So I mean, I heard from Vietnamese people that lived here that brought back memories. I heard from veterans. I heard, you know, and I heard from my other co-workers at the paper. One of the first stories that I got into that kind of will never leave me is when I first went to work in Glades County. They had one of the first sunshine law violation cases. I actually went to trial. It may have been the first one in the state, and I covered that. When I came in, they didn't tell me about this, but I didn't. So it's kind of like I was thrown to the wolves with these guys had gotten together over half a side of beef, and they kind of agreed on how they were going to do things. And they, because of the pre-trial publicity, they moved it from Moorhaven to Fort Myers. And they were convicted, but you know, it was basically a slap on the wrist. Nobody went to jail or anything like that. But that was really eye-opener. I remember 9/11. You know, not that I wrote those stories. I was an editor, but you know, just you know, the shock of that, and pulling a special edition together. That was here in Bradenton, of course.
Jim, what's the future of print newspapers? Any idea?
Can you
Yeah.
repeat the question, Mr.
Yeah, the question was, what's the future of print newspapers? I'm probably wrong on this, because I have a very muddy crystal ball, but I think that print will always be with us in some form. I mean, I know that digital is extremely important as the way that the industry is going, but I can't really conceive of a day that print goes away. I think people want to hold things in their hand. So, I mean, for this, again, a lot more people are looking at, you know, a paper copy rather than on Kindle. But, you know, what do I know? Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
You know, I do want to thank Jim for being here. The book is fascinating if you have a chance. And actually, Jim brought 2 copies that we're going to wrap off here in a few minutes. But I do want to thank him for being here. I don't know, do we have a golden ruler? Yes, we do. Jim, come back up. Jim, I want to present to you our golden rule for your future success so that you can measure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you again for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, especially our guest. And our next meeting will be February 16th with Steve Blast. He's the Pittsburgh Pirates player and color commentator. And spring training is almost here, so we'll look forward to that. And so we hope to see you at that time, and if you want to attend in person, remember to purchase your ticket by Friday before. Thank you very much.